The story of the Pittsburgh Steelers is one of grit, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of greatness, unfolding over decades and deeply rooted in the city's blue-collar identity. Founded in 1933 by Art Rooney, the Steelers were not born into immediate glory. In fact, their earliest decades were marred by frustration, inconsistency, and mediocrity. For 40 years, the franchise was little more than an afterthought in the National Football League, overshadowed by powerhouse franchises like the Green Bay Packers, Chicago Bears, and New York Giants. Yet, this period of struggle would forge the resilience and identity of the franchise, setting the stage for one of the most celebrated dynasties in football history. When Art Rooney bought the team for just $2,500, football was not yet the massive cultural phenomenon it would become, and Pittsburgh itself was a city dominated by steel mills and hard-working families who found little time for distraction. The early Steelers, then known as the Pittsburgh Pirates, shared their name with the city's baseball club and often struggled to field competitive rosters. The team routinely finished at or near the bottom of the standings, suffering losing season after losing season. Still, Rooney kept the dream alive, holding on to the franchise through thick and thin, even when money was tight and the future uncertain. The Steelers of the 1940s faced unique challenges, including player shortages due to World War II. At one point, they merged with the Philadelphia Eagles in 1943 to form a temporary team called the Steagles, and later with the Chicago Cardinals in 1944 to form Cardpit. Neither of these experimental mergers proved successful, but they underscored how tenuous the Steelers' existence was at that time. Even as other franchises found ways to thrive, Pittsburgh was trapped in an endless cycle of disappointment. Fans who showed up at Forbes Field, their early home, hoped for brighter days but mostly endured heartbreak. The 1950s and 1960s continued in much the same fashion. While the franchise managed to acquire some talented players, such as Bobby Lane and Ernie Stautner, team success remained elusive. Lane, a tough quarterback who had already made his name with the Detroit Lions, brought a spark in the late 1950s, but by then the Steelers were still far from serious contenders. Stautner, meanwhile, became the first Steelers player to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, representing one of the few bright spots in a long era of frustration. By the end of the 1960s, the Steelers had yet to win a championship of any kind and had made the playoffs only once in their history. Everything began to change in 1969 with two pivotal moves that would alter the course of the franchise forever: the hiring of Chuck Noll as head coach and the drafting of Mean Joe Green. Noll, a quiet but uncompromising man with a sharp football mind, was brought in to reshape the culture of a team long accustomed. The 1980s ushered in a transitional period for the Pittsburgh Steelers. After a run of dominance in the 1970s that saw the franchise win 4 Super Bowls in 6 years, the team found itself grappling with the inevitable decline that comes when legendary players retire and dynasties fade. Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Mel Blount, Lynn Swann, and John Stallworth had become household names, but as age and injuries took their toll, the Steelers were forced to confront the end of an era. Bradshaw, the quarterback who had been the centerpiece of the dynasty, struggled with elbow injuries that limited his effectiveness. By 1983, he was nearing the end of his career, and his departure left a void that would take years to properly fill. Harris, the dependable running back, left the team in 1984 after a contract dispute, finishing his career briefly with the Seattle Seahawks. Green had retired earlier in the decade, Lambert's body gave out on him, and Swann retired due to head injuries. By the mid-1980s, nearly all of the stars of the 1970s dynasty had moved on, leaving Chuck Noll to rebuild the roster and re-establish the team's identity. Despite the massive turnover, the Steelers still managed to field competitive teams. The defense, long the hallmark of Pittsburgh football, remained a point of pride. Players like Donnie Shell, Mike Merriweather, and Keith Willis kept the unit respectable. On offense, the team experimented with different quarterbacks, including Cliff Stout, Mark Malone, and Bubby Brister, but none came close to replicating the stability or success that Bradshaw had provided. Inconsistency at the game's most important position kept the Steelers from returning to the same heights. The Steelers of the 1980s had moments of hope, particularly in 1984, when they reached the AFC Championship game against the Miami Dolphins. That season, under quarterback Mark Malone and with a resurgent defense, the Steelers shocked the Denver Broncos in the divisional round before falling to Dan Marino and the Dolphins one game shy of the Super Bowl. Still, those flashes of promise were rare, and for most of the decade, the team hovered around mediocrity. As the 1990s approached, the Rooney family once again faced a pivotal decision. Chuck Noll, who had guided the team to 4 Super Bowls, was still respected, but it was clear that his methods were no longer producing the same results. By 1991, after 23 seasons as head coach, Noll retired, leaving behind a legacy as one of the greatest coaches in NFL history. His tenure transformed the Steelers from a laughingstock into the league's most dominant franchise of the 1970s, and though the 1980s were less successful, his emphasis on building through the draft and developing talent had become the franchise's DNA. To replace Noll, the Steelers turned to a fiery young coach named Bill Cowher. Hired in 1992, Cowher was a native of the Pittsburgh area and embodied the toughness and passy. When Bill Cowher stepped away after the 2006 season, the Steelers found themselves at another pivotal crossroads. Their identity was strong, their roster still loaded with talent, and their young quarterback Ben Roethlisberger just entering his prime. The Rooney family needed a head coach who could not only maintain the foundation Cowher had built but also take the team even further. In 2007, they surprised many by hiring 34-year-old Mike Tomlin, then the defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings. Tomlin, the 10th head coach in franchise history, became only the 3rd head coach since 1969, following Chuck Noll and Cowher, a testament to the Steelers' unmatched stability and loyalty to their leaders. Tomlin's arrival injected fresh energy into the team. Despite his youth and limited head coaching experience, he carried himself with confidence, discipline, and an ability to command respect in the locker room. His approach emphasized accountability, preparation, and adaptability, values that resonated with the veterans on the roster. The Steelers didn't miss a beat under his leadership. In his first season, they went 10-6 and returned to the playoffs, signaling that the franchise's commitment to continuity was paying off once again. The 2008 season, Tomlin's second, became one of the most celebrated in Steelers history. With a dominant defense led by Troy Polamalu, James Harrison, James Ferrier, and Casey Hampton, and an offense anchored by Roethlisberger, Hines Ward, and emerging receiver Santonio Holmes, the Steelers marched through the regular season with a 12-4 record. Their defense, known as one of the most intimidating in modern NFL history, suffocated opponents and carried the team through a brutal schedule. In the playoffs, they defeated the San Diego Chargers and then their longtime rivals, the Baltimore Ravens, in a hard-hitting AFC Championship game to punch their ticket to Super Bowl 43. In the Super Bowl, the Steelers faced the Arizona Cardinals in a game that quickly turned into an all-time classic. James Harrison provided one of the most unforgettable plays in Super Bowl history when he intercepted a Kurt Warner pass and rumbled 100 yards for a touchdown just before halftime, the longest play in Super Bowl history at the time. Yet, the game was far from over. The Cardinals stormed back in the fourth quarter, taking a late lead on a touchdown pass from Warner to Larry Fitzgerald. With the Steelers trailing 23-20 and just over 2 minutes remaining, Roethlisberger engineered a legendary drive. With pinpoint throws under immense pressure, he guided the Steelers downfield, culminating in a breathtaking touchdown catch by Santonio Holmes in the corner of the end zone, where Holmes dragged his toes just inside the line. The play instantly entered football lore, securing a 27-23 victory and giving the Steelers their 6th Lombardi trophy, the most of any franchise at that time. That victory solidified Tomlin's place in Steelers